Baltimore, July this weekend. There'll be fireworks. There'll be picnics and crabs and beer and all that good stuff, and certainly some baseball north of the border before we get there. The Orioles in Toronto doing all things Canada with the Blue Jays, and quite frankly, trying to figure out who's going to be in last place by the time the 4th of July rolls around. This guy has covered the Toronto Blue Jays out at Sportsnet. You can find him out on Twitter as well at Shai Davidi. That's Shidavidi. He is also the author of Big 50 in the Toronto Blue Jays, as well as covering the Blue Jays. Boy, this has been a disappointing campaign for the Blue Jays. I mean, as bad as we're feeling about ourselves around here, the Blue Jays sort of fell a little bit in April, picked up in May, but still look like they're on a tough road right now.
Absolutely. They've been treading water largely in June, and they're just coming out of a real soft spot in their schedule where they had 18 games against 500, sub-500 teams. And they really didn't do much with it. They were 8-10 over that stretch, and they really needed to have been better, especially because they're entering a very tough stretch at the end of June into July, where they're facing some of the better clubs in the American League that are really going to give them a run. And in a lot of ways, this stretch could make or break their season, because if they're going to fall back and they're not going to show well against the teams they need to beat to get past, well, then, they have to realistically think about selling off some pieces before the deadline. On the flip side of that, show well, give management a reason to believe and force their hand, and maybe the Blue Jays end up adding. So, it's going to be a really interesting month. They've done a lot of procrastination so far this season, and if they're going to be a playoff team again, they've got to pick it up.
Shai, we're making this argument around here on a daily basis when Machado's hitting 225, when Chris Davis isn't there, when Hardy's not there, when the pitching has been not just bad, Shai. I mean, we're talking legendarily worse than 100 years over the sample size of a couple of weeks. I mean, you look up, all week long, you're going to see pitchers with ERAs of 6 and 7 and 8. It's late June. It's certainly getting late early for the Orioles, and they are not the kind of ownership and not the kind of franchise that's going to sell off, maybe even if it's in their best interest long term, to say, what can we get for Manny Machado right now? Let's deal off Castillo. Let's bust this thing up right now so that we can be better in the future. Because, Shai, I'm not going to say the Blue Jays can't win the World Series this year, but I don't think the Orioles can win the World Series this year.
Look, I understand what you're saying, and I understand it from both ends. I think from a Blue Jays perspective, this realistically could be their last good shot with this group. I mean, they could rejig a couple things next year and maybe take another run at it. But the core of this team is just getting older and older. They need to add some young players at some point. I think the Orioles, to a certain degree, are in a similar spot, only they have less young pitching than the Blue Jays, so it's a bit more complex for them. That being said, when you have a core that has a chance to win, I mean, you delve into a rebuild, it can be ugly for a long period of time. Both these franchises know about that. And you don't want to bail on a of opportunity too early, because if your team's got a track record, they could get hot, they can make a bit of a run, and obviously that's more pleasing because opportunities to win are very difficult to come by. But there are times where you have to realistically look at yourself. I think that's what the Yankees did last year at the deadline, and they were on the cusp. They could have been competitive. You can make your argument, hey, you get hot, you compete for a wild card, you win the wild card game, and then who knows? But instead, they made the painful decisions. They moved Chapman, they moved Andrew Miller, they moved some other pieces, they injected their farm system with youth, and all of a sudden they're getting some results for it. So it's a really tough decision in both these cities, and I can understand both sides of the argument.
At least in Toronto, there does feel like there's a little bit of a cavalry coming over the over the cliff here in regard to Sanchez and in regard to Happ and some other guys, that it could certainly look better in the second half than it's looked in the first half from a pitching perspective, right?
Well, I think in general the whole thing can look a lot better than it has, because they've used a lot of real replacement level players or worse for extended periods this season because of the number of injuries. I mean, we saw a lot of Matt Latos and Casey Lawrence and Mike Bolsinger in the rotation, and a lot of Ryan Goins and Darwin Barney and Ezekiel Carrera and
Jared Salto-Lamacchia. How about that? You even resurrected him, right?
That was a bad plan. But I mean, Luke Maley played for an extended period, and great defender, great defensive catcher, brings a lot to the table. But on the flip side, you know, there's not a lot of offense there, and these aren't the guys that they were built to carry them. So there should in theory be a lot of upside. But a lot of these guys are still banged up. It's hard to come back mid-season after an injury and perform to your career norms. That's usually not how it goes. And so, you know, is there some upside? Yeah, there's some upside, but there's volatility to that upside. And it's very possible that a lot of guys don't reach their usual career projections just because of the type of injuries that they've sustained and had to deal with. So, you know, there is reason to believe. There is reason to be concerned. I think if you're the Blue Jays, you want to let it play out for a while longer before making any decisions.
I think you could have convinced me on Bautista this year or even Morales, but Justin Smoke, at this point in his career, we haven't seen anything like this in a while, right? I mean, a guy that's a middling guy, just trying to Mendoza himself, just trying to hit the ball a little bit and, you know, and sort of justify his lofty draft position. But then this year, there's been this incredible breakout over the first half of the year.
Yeah, in a lot of ways, he's really been the story for the Blue Jays this first half. You can definitely make a case that he's been their MVP and definitely been their steadiest performer from day one to now. And you know, good for him. You know, he's dealt with a lot of crap over his career, from, you know, the pressures that he got in Seattle, you know, the constantly having to live up to the trade there and always being viewed through that prism. And anything he did there wasn't going to be good enough. It's a ballpark that really didn't suit his skill set. I think if you hit in a park like Safeco, you want to be athletic. You want to be a gap-to-gap athletic kind of guy. And, you know, he's not quick on the base pass. It just didn't suit him. And in Toronto, he's been, you know, he had a nice 2015 when used in the right way. And then last year, you know, he just sort of lost his playing time, lost his confidence, lost his groove. And this year, you know, he made a few adjustments, some physical. More important ones probably are mental, in terms of not being so hard on himself, not continually, you know, taking so at bat so hard, and really trying to put pressure himself to perform. Just really focusing on doing the right things at the plate and some process, and he's got the results. So, you know, there's a reason why guys with pedigree and ability keep getting chances, because, you know, there is a possibility that they're going to figure it out and put it all together. And Justin Smoke has used this opportunity and really put it together.
We're joined by Shai Davidi from Toronto, Canada, and Sportsnet. He is their baseball columnist north of the border for all things Blue Jays. The Blue Jays taking on the Orioles this week up in the beautiful city of Toronto, where hopes were high and dashed. And, you know, you mentioned guys struggling and things between their ears. Certainly you were on the front end of a story here over the weekend with Osuna in the bullpen. And, you know, this is a tough thing, I think, for a young person to go through. I think all of us have had some self-doubts. All of us have had a moment or two of darkness or dark feelings or dread in some way. And for a baseball player, anyone, to come out and say that they're struggling with this, I know he was mainly lauded, not just in your country, but I think throughout baseball for what happened this weekend. I don't know what the future holds there, but you certainly know Roberto Osuna, right?
Sure. I mean, you know, we know him to the degree that, you know, a media member can get to know a player. And look, he's been like an uber confident kid. He's dealt with a ton of pressure over the past couple of years, and I'm not going to pretend I know what he's going through or can explain it. And really, I don't think it's our place. He can tell us whatever he wants to tell us. What he's dealing with is his business. But he is a very courageous young man, without a doubt. He's proven that on the baseball field, and now he's showing it off the field as well. And it's interesting the way our society has evolved. You know, years ago, decades ago, an athlete making that kind of admission would have been labeled as soft. It would have gotten all these kind of criticisms. And I think now we're a kinder society. We're a more understanding society. We're a more respectful society. We're better understanding of the different things, different experiences and pressures that people face on a daily basis. And deservedly so. There's been there's been an outpouring of support, as you mentioned, and a lot of understanding and a lot of respect. So, we're all rooting for Roberto Osuna and hoping the best for him as a person first and foremost. And how that translates on the baseball field secondarily.
Dude, respect, dignity, kindness. You do live in Canada, don't you, Shy?
We try to do it right up here.
I know you do. That's why I enjoy my visit. Hey, before I get back to baseball, I do want to talk some hockey because you and I were talking off the air. I went up for the Caps and the Leafs, and I told people I was pulling for that series all along. Like back in February and March, I'm like, the Caps could play Ottawa or Boston or maybe even Pittsburgh at some point in the first round. I mean, there was a lot of movement, especially after the Caps went out to the West Coast and got their clocks cleaned for a weekend. But all along, I rooted for Toronto. All along, I had a flight booked into Buffalo to drive across the border and do it. And then the stars aligned and I went up there. That was really a biblical experience if you like hockey, and it really gives you a taste of what that city's going to be all about over the next 5 years. That a lot of that baseball enthusiasm that was there, and I saw that. Hey, I was in the Dome the night Carter hit the home run in '93, Shy. So, I'm old school out on Yonge Street that night. I mean, if you couldn't party that night, forget about it in either country. But, to see that kind of excitement there for hockey, there's a Sports Jones that beats in your city there that's just dying for like a real winner. And I think the Blue Jays have given them a real taste of that the last couple of years.
Yeah, well, it's actually been a nice couple of years. It's funny you mentioned '93, and I was growing up at that point, and that was sort of the pinnacle of my Toronto sports fan existence. When the Leafs were making back-to-back runs to the conference semifinals, and the Jays won back-to-back World Series, and both teams were terrific at the same time. And the closest thing to it since has been the past couple of years where, the Raptors have made a couple good runs into the playoffs, and they've been a really good team for an extended period. And then the Jays have gotten into the postseason, have had some fun. Toronto FC went to the MLS Cup final and lost to Seattle. And the Leafs is the big one that everyone's been waiting for, because I think, all the other teams have their fan bases. As FC the smallest, the Raptors next biggest, the Blue Jays is a very, very big fan base. It spans across the country. But the Leafs are, it's multi-generational here in a way that the other sports aren't. And the run that they put together this past season was a lot of fun. They're a young team that's really exciting to watch. They skate. They're creative. They play a beautiful brand of hockey that's really, really easy on the eyes. And so the fact that they were so young and so inexperienced, it was great to see. I think there's going to be a lot of excitement for next season and where the ceiling is for guys like Austin Matthews and Mitch Marner and William Nylander, et cetera. And they add some defensemen and put it together. Maybe there's some more good times to be had, and an end to the drought dating back to 1967 for a Stanley Cup. You
do know that kid's from Phoenix, right? I mean, how is that even possible, right? It's crazy.
It is incredible, but it's one thing Gary Bettman can point to in his often panned strategy to move teams into the Sun Belt in the U.S. is, hey, one of the generational talents in the United States is born in Phoenix.
And bred in Toronto and shall be fed in Toronto before it's all over. Last thing for you, because we have soft hearts around here for our former heroes, the Steve Pearce thing. In the lineup, out of the lineup, a little bit of a Swiss Army knife, right, in a lot of ways. But he was beloved here, and I know he's trying to figure it out in Toronto at this point, right?
Yeah, he's had a real star-crossed sort of season. He just started off on the wrong foot and just couldn't hit. He was snake bit for pretty much all of April. He didn't hit his first home run till May. And then just as he was starting to get going, he got injured. And then he came back and looked good for a few games. Then he got banged up, so he missed some time. And he's back in there now. But it's really been a bizarre season for him, sort of a rough start. And with the Blue Jays, when they were really grinding to score runs for an extended period at the beginning of the season, his bat was one of the glaring ones that was in need of more from. So, if he's had nice stretches, everyone believes in him, and I think people are waiting to embrace him, but they need to see a good run of offense from him first.
Shy, what would a sell-off look like for the Blue Jays? What would be left of the carcass if on July 31st they decide to do that? I don't know if they will. Obviously Mark Shapiro running the thing now, and behind that is this corporation. We know the dingbat that runs our team here, and I don't think that the Orioles would sell off in any way. I just don't think it's part of the makeup of the owner, quite frankly, in regard to Machado or anyone else. And if you're not going to sell all of it, then what's the point? I mean, we're not at the tinkering point here, but for the Blue Jays, there are a lot of pieces there, right? If they wanted to sell.
Right. Well, I think the question would be, to what degree do you sell, right? Do you just go for a more strategic pullback where you sell off a couple pending free agents like Marco Estrada, Francisco Liriano, Joe Smith, maybe Jose Batista, or do you try to go full nuclear and take offers on Josh Donaldson and really kind of reset the thing? So I think that's the first conversation that has to be had. Josh Donaldson does have one more year of control after this one. But if you're going to blow it up to the point where, 2018 is going to be a write-off, then I think you have to try to figure out what you might be able to get for Josh Donaldson, because that's the chip that you can really play. And if it's not, if it's more strategic pullback because you think that you can, change some pieces and still make another go of it in 2018, then obviously you're better off keeping him, because you just can't get players like that very easily.
Shay, I always appreciate your time, man. Enjoy talking Blue Jays baseball as well as Leafs hockey with you. We hope to stay in touch around here and hope that we can have a meaningful conversation later on in the summer. Quite frankly, I'm worried about both of us.
Yeah, well, it'd be nice to have meaningful baseball in both our cities again this season. We've been spoiled the past few years. And it'd be hard to walk back from it at this point.
Can you explain to us what Jimenez was doing in the game at that point last year, or no? Are you still at a loss for words on that?
I can understand going to Jimenez in that spot because of how good a track record he has against so many of the Blue Jays players. But again, with Britton in the bullpen at that point, I think once you get runners on base, you want to lose with your best guy.
Well, yeah, it failed, and it shall ever have been a failure, and we'll forever wonder, right? That's what makes baseball great. Shai, great having you on, man. We'll send everybody out to Sportsnet and find you out on Twitter at Shai Davidi as well. Good luck with the book, too.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
You got it. He is the author of Big 50 in the Toronto Blue Jays and the great moments in the history of the Blue Jays. You can find him at Shai Davidi. That's SHIDAVIDI. No one covers the Blue Jays better. Tens of thousands, almost 100,000 followers out on Twitter, as on the scene for all things Blue Jays as anyone in Toronto. You can find me in the Buy a Toyota audio of all 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device. Just download the TuneIn Radio app. We do come in crystal clear from wherever you are. The morning newspaper ships to your email inbox each and every morning at 7 a.m. It's all powered up by Planet Fitness and PlanetFitness.com. Still $10 a month wherever there's a Planet Fitness near you. I was just happy for the Planet Fitness in Landover last week to afford me parking. So big thanks to the Woods family and everyone at Planet Fitness, the Bricks, everyone for giving me a safe place to park my car at FedEx Field. So I am appreciative for seeing Bono and Larry Mullen Jr. and Adam Clayton and, of course, the Great Edge. Not the Lumineers. I skipped that part. Nasty at WNST.net finds me. I'm on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, and streaming live on our Facebook as well as our YouTube WNSTV channel. Don't forget Chapter 8 of the Peter Principles. That is the 25 years of ownership of Peter Angelos. Now online, free. It is my book I was working on 4 years ago, now delivered for free to you, chapter by chapter. This week is Chapter 8. We're up to Albert Bell. Lovely. I'm Nestor. We are WNST.net, AM 1570 and WNST Towson, Baltimore. And we never stop talking Baltimore sports.